Exercise 21. Discussion 1. Listen to part of a discussion among students in a study group.
So, what do you think will be on the test?
I'll bet the first question will be, define the term organization. And Dr. Graham will want it, word for word. So here it is, straight from the book. An organization represents a specific type of social relationship or arrangement between persons, with either closed or limited admission and regulations enforced by a person or group in a position of authority.
You got that right. He's gone over that definition at the beginning of almost every class since the last test. And then, let me see here, then we'll probably have to compare formal and informal organizations. So this is the answer, guys. A formal organization is characterized by formality. No surprise there. A hierarchy of ranked positions and a complex division of labor, as well as a relatively large size. Okay. Now, want me to do informal organizations?
I'll do it. An informal organization brings people together to explore a common interest.
Okay. Don't forget about bureaucracies.
Yeah. Besides the definition, what?
I've got a lot on Weber's ideal type of bureaucracy.
You do? I don't remember anything about that.
Here, let me read you some of my notes. It's called Weber's ideal bureaucracy. Maybe you'll remember something. I have a list of the characteristics. 1, paid officials. 2, benefits for career officials. 3, salary increases, seniority rights, and promotions by examination. 4, hierarchical organization.
Oh, okay, sure, I have that. I just didn't have it identified. You know, as Weber's ideal bureaucracy.
You've got them all then? All the characteristics?
Yeah, I got them.
Okay. We should probably be ready for the Bensman and Rosenberg, the Bensman and Rosenberg study.
That's the one about advancement, right?
Right. I have it summarized like this. It's not what you know, but who you know.
And how well you're liked by the right people.
Bingo.
Moving right along. Parkinson's law has to be there. Here's what I have on that one. In any bureaucratic organization, work expands to fill the time available for its completion.
I always get that mixed up with the, what's the other one? You know, the Peter Principle.
No, listen, the Peter Principle is, in any hierarchy, every employee tends to rise to his level of incompetence.
Okay. So what does that mean, really?
Look, let's say you're a great professor and you get a promotion to maybe department chair, which is an administrative position. But you can't use your teaching skills in the administrative position. So you aren't as successful. You see, you got hired on the basis of skills that don't translate. Transfer to the next job.
So you don't get promoted again because you aren't doing such a great job, as an administrator?
Right. You reached your, just a minute, I've got it right here. You've reached your level of incompetence.
Listen, the way that I keep them straight is to think Parkinson's law is about the work and the Peter Principle is about the people.
Hey, thanks. That's a good idea.
Yeah. Do you think he'll include anything on leadership?
Maybe. If he does, he'll probably ask us about the 2 different types of leaders.
Okay, let me see if I can remember that. The instrumental leader is goal-oriented and organizes the group by assigning tasks, and the expressive leader is more socially inclined, someone who works toward, let me think. The expressive leader works toward solidarity among group members by offering support.
I'm impressed. That's almost word for word from the lecture.
Remember, Dr. Graham doesn't reward creativity. He's looking for the stuff he taught, just like he taught it. Haven't you noticed how he grades the quizzes?
I know. Just kidding.
Okay, so the short answer questions will be explain the Peter Principle, state Parkinson's law, summarize the Bensman and Rosenberg study, Bensman and Rosenberg, and contrast formal and informal organizations. Anything else?
Compare the two types of leaders.
Right. That leaves the what's his name, ideal bureaucracy for the essay?
Weber's ideal bureaucracy.
Weber.
That should about do it then. I think we covered the most important points in the chapter and the notes.
Now all we have to do is review a little and we should be ready for it.
Number 1. What is the main purpose of this study group? Two, who has identified an ideal bureaucracy? Three, which law states that people advance until they reach a position in which they are less likely to succeed? Four, which topic will probably appear as an essay question? Five, listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
You got that right. He's gone over that definition at the beginning of almost every class since the last test.
Why does the man say this?
He's gone over that definition at the beginning of almost every class since the last test.
Six, what can we assume about Dr. Graham? Discussion 2. Listen to part of a discussion among students who are working on a group project.
Okay, let's get going now that we're all here.
Okay.
Fine.
Just to remind everyone, we agreed to do our group presentation on the SQ3R study reading method. And since there are 4 of us in the group, all of you are going to take 2 of the steps in the method, and I'm going to say a few words to introduce the presentation, and then I'll summarize at the end, and finally we can go over the handout.
Sounds good, except I had only 1 step.
Right, Carl. Phil and Martha have 2, though. And, we said we'd all be ready to go through everything this time.
I think we all brought our scripts, Joan.
Okay, I'll start. This is it. Today, our group will show you how to use the study reading method known as SQ3R. The letters stand for 5 steps in the reading process: survey, question, read, review, and recite. Then I'll say, each of the steps should be done carefully and in the order that I mentioned.
Is that it?
Yes. We only have 10 minutes, Phil, and we want to spend, I'd say, at least 6 or 7 minutes going over the handout. So we have less than a minute for each step.
Okay. Well, after the introduction, it's my turn. And I'll say, in all study reading, a survey should be the first step. Survey means to look quickly. In study reading, you need to look quickly at titles, words in darker or larger print or italics, words with capital letters, illustrations, and charts. At this point, you don't stop to write. Read complete sentences. Just look at the important divisions of the material.
Okay, I'm up next. The second step is question. Try to form questions based on your survey. Use the question words who, what, when, where, why, and how.
My turn? Let's see. Now you're ready for the third step. Read. You'll be rereading the titles and important words that you looked at in the survey. But this time you'll read the examples and details as well. Sometimes it's useful to take notes while you read. Some readers prefer to underline important points, and it seems to be just as useful as note-taking. What you should do, whether you take notes or underline, is to read actively. Think about what you're reading as a series of ideas, not just a sequence of words. Go ahead, Phil.
Okay, thanks. The fourth step is review. Remember the questions that you wrote down before you read the material? You should be able to answer them now. You'll notice that some of the questions were treated in more detail in the reading. Concentrate on those. Also, wait a minute, I changed this part. Also, review material that you didn't consider in your questions. Martha?
Sorry. The last step is recite. Try to put the reading into your own words. Summarize it either in writing or orally.
Done?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Now, I'm going to just summarize in one sentence. I'll say SQ3R, survey, question, read, review, and recite. Let me repeat that. SQ3R, survey, question, read, review, and recite. Then I'll say, but to really understand the method, let's take a look at a reading passage and try to use SQ3R. Then I'm going to pass out a passage from our textbook. I thought I'd use something in the next chapter because so most people probably wouldn't have read it yet.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, what's the next chapter on?
It's about motivation. There's a really good passage about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation.
What's that?
Intrinsic motivation is when you want to do something for your own reasons. But extrinsic motivation is when you have external rewards like money or something. That's really a simplistic explanation. But anyway, the passage isn't too long, and it has, the headings are good, and a few words in bold type, and capital letters. So I think it should be perfect for the survey part.
Look, here it is in the book. On page 351. This does look good for our purposes.
So what are you thinking? Maybe just like have everyone look in their books?
I think we should copy the pages onto a handout. Everybody doesn't bring a book to class. I know I don't. I just show up with my notebook.
True.
Well, it's easy enough to copy it. I'll do that.
I know it'll be a little more work, but it would probably be good to summarize the SQ3R words, maybe at the top of the page.
And it would be nice to have all of our names on it.
Sure, no problem.
Number 1. What is the purpose of this study group? Two. What do the letters in the SQ3R method represent? Three. What does the word survey mean? Four. What will the group do at the end of the presentation? Five. Listen again to part of the conversation, then answer the question.
At this point, you don't stop to write. Read complete sentences. Just look at the important divisions of the material.
Why does the man say this?
Read complete sentences.
Six. Who is probably the group leader? Exercise 22. Talk 1. Listen to part of a talk by a college professor.
Your test on Friday will cover material from both of your textbooks, my lecture notes, and your lab assignments. There will be 50 multiple-choice questions and 5 short-answer essay questions. The multiple choice will count half of your grade, and the essay questions will count half of your grade. I will tell you right now that there won't be any math problems, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't review the formulas and know what they're used for. I wouldn't bother much with the notes from my first lecture, since that was an overview of the course, but you'll probably want to look at them when you study for the final. Oh yes, this test represents 25% of your total grade for the semester. The lab reports are 25%, attendance 10, and your final 40. Any questions?
Number 1. What is the purpose of the announcement? 2. On the test, how much will the multiple choice questions count? 3. For what percentage of the total grade will the test count? 4. What does the speaker say about math problems? 5. In which class would this announcement occur? 2. Listen to part of a talk by a college professor.
Before you start writing your term papers, I would like to clarify the differences among paraphrasing, quoting, and plagiarizing. All of these activities involve the use of someone else's ideas. But whereas paraphrasing and quoting are legitimate writing strategies, plagiarizing is a serious offense. In your term papers, I expect you to paraphrase, that is, to summarize someone else's ideas in your own words. I also expect you to quote, that is, to copy information from another source and enclose it in quotation marks in your paper. When you paraphrase and quote, be sure to cite the source of your information. If you do not cite the source, then you are plagiarizing. You are stealing the ideas and using them as your own. If I discover that you have plagiarized on your term paper, you will receive a 0 for the paper and an F for the course.
Number 1. What is the main topic of this talk? 2. What is plagiarizing? 3. What are 2 legitimate writing strategies? 4. What will happen to a student who plagiarizes on the term paper? 5. Who is the speaker? Exercise 23. Talk 1. Listen to part of a talk by a college professor.
The first few pages of the syllabus are an outline of the topics for each session. As you can see, you'll be responsible for reading the material before you come to class, so you'll have enough background to be able to follow the lecture. For example, on September 3rd, When you come to class, you should already have read the first 2 chapters in the text, so we can discuss the history of psychology in that session. The following week, you should have a grasp of chapters 3 and 4, so we can cover biology and the psychology of the brain, and so on. Now, let's take a few minutes to look at the policies and procedures listed on page 3 of the course syllabus. Refer to the section under Assignments first, please. You'll notice that all assignments must be typewritten and submitted on the due date in order for you to receive full credit, and the grade for a late assignment will be lowered by 1 letter for each day past the due date. Now look at the section under Examinations. As you see, all exams must be completed on the dates and times scheduled in the syllabus. If you must be absent, for an exam, then try to call me to let me know what your problem is. My office phone is on the syllabus, and my home phone is listed in the telephone directory. Of course, email is best, and you have my email address on page 1. It's right under my name on the syllabus. A make-up exam must be arranged within 1 week of the scheduled date of the exam. And I must warn you, the questions on the make-up will not be the same as the questions on the regular exam. In fact, I usually give multiple choice tests, but I always give short answer tests for make-ups. And my students tell me they say the make-ups are quite a bit more difficult than the regularly scheduled exams. Oh yes, let's take a minute to clarify my attendance policy. I suggest that you come to class. I'll be assigning you a seat. Yes, I know you'd rather choose your own seat, but this is a large class, and it would take up too much time to call the roll every session. So I'll just mark those people absent who aren't present in their seats by the time the class begins. Better late than never, but if you're late, you'd better check in with me after class so I can change my attendance records. Remember that attendance is 15% of the grade, which usually makes the difference between an A and a B or a B and a C. Let's not even talk about D's and F's. One more thing. If you need to request an incomplete, please remember that I only approve them for illness or for a serious personal problem, not just because you ran out of time. And you must submit a request form with a signed statement of explanation to my office in order for your incomplete to be considered. Otherwise, you'll have to register and take the entire course over again to get credit.
Number 1. What is the main purpose of this talk? Two. What is the speaker's policy for late assignments? 3. What is the professor's attendance policy? 4. What is the procedure for a student to receive a grade of incomplete? 5. Listen again to part of the talk, then answer the question.
Better late than never, but if you're late, you'd better check in with me after class so I can change my attendance records. Remember that attendance is 15% of the grade, which usually makes the difference between an A and a B or a B and a C.
Why does the professor say this?
Remember that attendance is 15% of the grade.
Six. What can we infer about the speaker? Talk 2. Listen to part of a class clarification by a professor.
I've been getting quite a few emails with questions about grading for the group project, so let me clarify that before we start class today. Each group has 5 members in it, except one group that has 6. The group project includes a presentation and a written report, but I'll be giving you 3 grades and averaging them for a final grade on the project. First, I'll be grading the written report as a whole, and every member of the group will receive the same grade on the written report. So it'll be to your benefit to divide the work and produce the best report you can. How do you divide the work? Well, in the past, some of my students have actually divided the report into sections, and each group member has written one of the sections. That's certainly a possibility, especially for groups who may have a problem finding mutual meeting times. But some of the other groups have assigned tasks to the group members. For example, 2 members might do the research, 2 members might write the report, and another member might provide editing and formatting of the final draft. In my experience, it's been difficult for a group of 5 or 6 people to do the actual writing line by line, but I have had a few groups do it that way. So you can see that you have a lot of flexibility in how to prepare the report. However, remember that everyone will receive the same grade for it. That brings us to the second grade, which is a group grade for the presentation. Again, I suggest that you share the labor here. If you have a group member who's artistic, you could capitalize on that talent, maybe by having posters, overheads, or visuals as part of the presentation. If you have an excellent speaker, someone who likes presenting, that person might be responsible for the majority of the oral presentation. Another person who writes well but prefers not to speak could prepare the handout if you choose to provide one. I think you see what I mean. The best way to get a high grade is to play to the strength of every group member. I mean that you shouldn't ask someone to perform a task that is outside his or her unique ability. And remember, everyone has the potential to contribute something to the group. But about the grade, again, there will be 1 grade for the group presentation, and everyone will receive the same grade. The major problem for previous groups, and I'll alert you to it right now, is preparing too much material for the time frame. Remember, you have 30 minutes, and that might seem like a lot of time, but many groups haven't been able to complete their presentations, and of course, they have had points deducted because of it. So, what about the third grade? This is an individual grade based on your contribution to the group. I'll be asking you to prepare a list of your activities as a group member, and I'll be giving you a grade based on participation. Let me explain that a little more. Let's say that one group member has an impressive list. How will I know that it's accurate? Not that anyone in this class would exaggerate, but to be as fair as possible, your list will not be complete without I'll be asking for the signatures of every group member, verifying that your list is appropriate for the work you've done. Then, you see, I can evaluate your performance on an individual basis. So, I'll have the 3 grades, and I'll add them together and average them to give you a total grade. I found that this system discourages hitchhikers. By that I mean someone who belongs to the group but doesn't contribute to the group. Let's say I have a group member with a grade of A for the group report, a grade of A for the group presentation, but a grade of D for the participation. Then that student will have a B or even a C for the final grade, whereas someone in the same group who has an A for participation will have an A for the final grade. I think that makes the grading a little more fair.
Number 1. What is the purpose of this talk? Two, how will the written report be graded? 3. How will the final grade be calculated for each student? 4. How will the professor know what each individual has contributed? 5. Listen again to part of the talk. Then answer the question.
How do you divide the work? Well, in the past, some of my students have actually divided the report into sections, and each group member has written one of the sections.
Why does the professor ask this?
How do you divide the work?
6. Why does the professor most probably use such a complicated grading system? 'Exercise 24, Talk 1. Listen to part of a lecture in a history class. The professor will discuss gold coins.
In 1792, Congress passed an act authorizing the coinage of gold eagles valued at $10, half eagles valued at $5, and quarter eagles valued at $2.50. These gold coins were standardized to silver on a 15-to-1 ratio, that is, 15 ounces of silver to 1 ounce of gold. Although the ratio was reasonable at the time that the bill was passed, by the turn of the century, the ratio in Europe had reached 15 3/4 to 1, and the overvalued gold coins in the United States were either smuggled out of the country or melted down. Gold therefore disappeared from circulation until 1834, when a new law reduced the weight of gold pieces. Soon afterward, gold coins appeared in a smaller size and returned to circulation. The new interest and demand for gold encouraged the mint to strike $20 double eagles and a smaller number of $50 gold coins. The financial uncertainty during the Great Depression of 1929 encouraged hoarding of gold coins by individuals, a situation that became so serious that the government finally ordered all gold coins to be turned in. During the next several years, a number of amendments exempted certain kinds of gold coins and allowed limited collecting. Since then, the interest in collecting gold coins has increased, and the restrictions have decreased. Now there are no restrictions regarding the export, import, purchase, sale, or collecting of gold coins in the United States.
Number 1. What is the main topic of this talk? 2. What was the value of the original gold eagle? 3. What was the value of silver to gold in 1792? 4. What happened after the law of 1834? 5. What are the restrictions on collecting gold coins today? 2. Listen to part of a lecture in a music appreciation class. The professor is discussing the work of Stephen Foster.
Stephen Foster was one of the most prolific songwriters of his time, contributing more than 200 songs during his 20-year career. His first attempt when he was 14 was a forgettable composition called the Tioga Waltz, a melody for 3 flutes which debuted at a school exhibition. His first published piece appeared only 3 years later in 1844. It was called Open Thy Lattice, Love, and it was rather typical of the sentimental tunes of the time. Still, it was a good effort for a 17-year-old composer. But it was minstrel music for which Foster will always be remembered. The songs of Southern black slaves in the pre-Civil War days evoke nostalgic themes, like the plantation era that was already fated to pass into history. His first successful piece, O Susanna, became popular throughout the world and is still widely sung. Campton Races followed with similar success. The most successful song written by an American to that date was Stephen Foster's Old Folks at Home, which appeared in 1851. Some of you may recall it as Way Down Upon the Swanee River, since it was also referred to by that title as well. In any case, an item in the musical world of New York stressed the unprecedented sales. At a time when half of all the sheet music published was a total failure and a sale of 5,000 copies was considered highly successful, Old Folks at Home sold nearly 100,000 copies. Old Kentucky Home, which came out 2 years later, capitalized on the reputation that Foster was making for himself and was also a huge seller. Now, what is interesting about the success of Stephen Foster is that he himself was ambivalent about it. Sometimes he hid his identity with pseudonyms. Sometimes he requested that his name be withheld from the cover to the sheet music. And other times he insisted that his name be displayed. Out of the context of the times, none of this seems to make sense. But when we contrast the musical world of high society with that of the common people, it becomes clear. Stephen Foster's success came from writing plantation songs for popular entertainment. The music was easy to remember, very repetitious, and available to everyone in the popular music halls. But the music that was considered serious and appropriate for society events was quite different. Foster proved that he could write such music, and perhaps had some secret desire to succeed on those terms, but that type of music didn't enjoy the widespread popularity of the plantation melodies that we still recognize today. Most school children have heard Jeannie with the Light Brown Hair and Beautiful Dreamer, but none would recognize the saccharine ballads and hymns that were considered by a genteel few his better music.
Number 1. What kind of music is associated with Stephen Foster? Two. Which piece was the most successful song written by an American? Three. Why did Stephen Foster withhold his name from the cover to some of his sheet music? Four. What best describes Stephen Foster's most popular songs? Five. What do we know about Stephen Foster? Exercise 25. Talk 1. Listen to part of a lecture in a psychology class. The professor will discuss heredity and environment.
Good morning. I trust that you have all read the assignment and that we can proceed with today's lecture. As you know from your text, both heredity and environment play a role in the development of the personality. In addition, research at the University of Texas at Arlington has shown that the order of one's birth in relationship to brothers and sisters may be a significant factor. Those born first tend to develop personality traits that make them domineering, ambitious, and highly motivated to achieve. And the same is true for only children. In contrast, children born later in the family tend to be more socially adept, likable, talkative individuals. Also interesting in the research is the fact that a woman with older brothers and a man with older sisters seem to be able to interact more easily with the opposite sex. Having older opposite-sex siblings seems to be important in being able to establish social relationships with members of the opposite sex. There is also some evidence that the youngest child may develop a very charming personality in order to be included in the activities of the older group. Of course, if the other children are no longer living at home, the youngest child is more likely to develop the characteristics of an only child.
Number 1. What is the main subject of this lecture? Two. What should the students know before they hear this lecture? 3. Which one of the people would probably be the most comfortable interacting with a member of the opposite sex? 4. What personality trait will firstborn children probably exhibit? 5. According to the research, what might be the dominant personality trait of the youngest child? 2. Listen to part of a lecture in an English literature class. The professor will be talking about American writers in the early 19th century.
Today we will discuss the Knickerbocker School, which was a rather informal group of writers who met in New York City during the early 1800s. The name Knickerbocker, let me write that down for you, was a tribute to Diedrich Knickerbocker, a character created by one of their members, the writer Washington Irving. At any one time, about 20 writers belonged to the group, including the 3 most important figures in early American literature: William Cullen Bryant, the editor of the New York Evening Post; Washington Irving, a well-known poet and storyteller; and novelist James Fenimore Cooper. Although Irving gained recognition in Europe as America's first legitimate man of letters, and his stories Rip Van Winkle and The Legend of Sleepy Hollow were widely published as serials, it was James Fenimore Cooper who achieved success with subjects and settings that were typically American. Cooper created the frontier novel, with a hero who embodied the American frontier spirit. In the Leatherstocking Tales, 5 novels about frontier life, the affable old scout Natty Bumppo evolves into a philosopher and even, some say, an epic hero. Bumppo is a frontiersman who knows how to live close to nature and possesses all the skills necessary for a rugged pioneer existence. But he is also an observer of life. He sees that the settlers are a civilizing influence. He respects the social order that they create. But he also sees the thoughtless and sometimes selfish abuse of the natural environment. The best of all the Leatherstocking tales has to be The Last of the Mohicans, which I believe at least some of you have seen on video. You may recall that the story recounts the conflict between the French and the English during the early years of independence, with Indians fighting on both sides. I personally feel that this represents some of Cooper's best writing, especially in those passages that recount the death of the Mohican chief's son in a noble attempt to avenge the murder of his love. Of course, there were others who had membership in the Knickerbocker School, but if you are familiar with the three major writers that we have discussed today, you'll have a feel for early American literature.
Number 1. What is the main focus of this talk? Two. What are the Leatherstocking tales? Three. What kind of character is Natty Bumppo? Four. Who was one of the most important members of the Knickerbocker School? Five. Which of the following best describes James Fenimore Cooper?